Welcome to this series of podcasts produced by Creative Lancashire. They were recorded live at the 2019 National Festival of Making Talks programme, where we listened to some of the most recognisable names in fashion, design, art and industry in a series of free talks and panel discussions. These talks are a rare opportunity for professional creatives, students, enthusiasts and the curious to learn more about the challenges, histories and future potential of making industries in their most diverse forms from those helping to shape them. In this roundtable talk, we invited diverse perspectives from women working in STEAM and related industries, with Philippa Glover, CNC Robotics, Helen Hegge, STEM First, Louise Gardner, Darwen Terracotta, and Daksha Patel, AIM Artist. Exploring the questions around barriers and challenges facing women in these professions, and in turn, how to inspire better equality in the industry.
Okay, welcome everyone to this morning's session around women in STEAM and inspiring the next generation. My name is Philippa Glover and I'm one of the team at a company called CNC Robotics based in Aintree. And we're really changing the way things are made using robots. And it's a really exciting time to be in industry, not just to be a woman in industry, but to be part of leading some of the conversations around how arts and science can work together to creatively problem solve some of the challenges that we face in society today. So really privileged to be joined by everyone here and looking forward to the next 75 minutes to really talk about how we inspire the next generation. So just a little bit of housekeeping. We've got no planned fire drills at all, but if there is a fire alarm, the nearest fire exit is over there. I'm looking that way. And I'm gonna nominate Ed. So I was at a Siemens Digital Talks this week where they did something different and like you have when you go on an aeroplane. If we follow Ed will show us the best way to go if there is a planned fire alarm. Hopefully he doesn't mind that responsibility. So just for everyone, so everyone's aware, is we are recording today's discussion and it's something that the team at Creative Lancashire and the National Making of Festival will use to further promote the conversations in a series of podcasts, I believe. So if any member of the audience does want to contribute to the conversation, or if you've got a question, if you put your hand up or give me a little nod or a wave, then Ed will come over to you with a microphone. So that's really it from a housekeeping perspective. As a collective, we had a bit of a conversation this morning that roundtable conversations like these are really important. They're really important to bring people together who don't normally talk about these topics and to enable us to talk about, okay, well, what do we need to do to inspire that next generation? What we'd really like to do in this session is just not walk away and say, that was a really good conversation. We want to use this to actually come up with a bit of even if it's one simple, okay, as a collective, this is what we're going to do. So I'm going to try and guide the conversation. So in the last 15 minutes or so, really looking for everyone here to help us come to, okay, well, what is that kind of concrete outcome of this conversation and what is our will do? Hopefully I'll be able to steer the ship to enable us to do that. So we're just going to go around the table and introduce everyone briefly before we kick off the conversation, really. So, do you want to start?
Good morning, everyone. My name's Louise Hardwick. I'm a co-founder of an organisation called DigiEnable. We do digital training and digital services with a different hat on. I'm also one of the directors of Digital Lancashire. But in a previous life, I used to be in the arts sector. We used to help run a community arts charity with community media. So I've kind of got the technology and the arts from the STEAM element. And we have clients on the training side of our company, people like Arts Council and creative hubs across the UK. So we support artists to have more digital skills as well. That's me.
Hi everyone, I'm Miranda Webb. I work for a global IT company called DXC Technology. I also have a degree in photography, so a bit of a change, but really good for this panel. And I'm just about to launch a community interest company called Be the Change Digital, which is all around how we help young people get into these kind of opportunities when they get older, how we build some resilience, and also upskill the current workforce for kind of the changing workforce we're going to have in the future. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Helen Hegge. I'm a director and owner of a consultancy called STEM First. Our remit is to inspire young people and their influences around science, technology, engineering and maths. I run what's called the STEM Ambassador Scheme across Lancashire and Cumbria, which is a government-funded programme. Miranda is an example of one of our 2,000 volunteer STEM ambassadors that we link to the community and to education to inspire about STEM. To give you an idea about the size of that programme, we did just under 40,000 volunteer hours across Lancashire and Cumbria over the last year, so a lot is going on. In a previous existence, I was research and design engineering manager for Ford Motor Company. I worked for 12 years in the automotive sector after undertaking an engineering degree at Cambridge. I'm also a chartered mechanical engineer, and I'm very, very passionate about women in STEM, in STEAM. I'm also the engineering consultant for CBeebies, so if people in the audience have got young children or are aware of the Bits and Bob programme, you will see my name in the credits, so I've been involved in that from the inception, and I always say Bits is the daughter that I never had. So I'm very proud of the work that we're doing, but I really am excited about the conversation this morning because I think there's a long way to go.
Good morning, I'm Lucy Kennedy and I'm the CEO of the National Saturday Club, which is a nationwide education programme for young people between aged 13 to 16. So we were established about 10 years ago, so this is our 10th anniversary year this year, originally as an art and design focused education programme, but since then we've expanded to develop programmes in fashion and business, writing and talking and science and engineering. The programme takes place in universities and colleges, so the idea is that young people meet up on a Saturday and have very much making focused and innovation focused sessions with tutors in the universities and colleges. And really the key thing is that it's free and that they don't have to go, so it's very much something that they choose to do outside of education, and it's a very creative design-led approach to exploring these subjects. And this year we have 78 clubs across the country and 1,600 young people taking part.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Louise Gardner. I am the Lab Tech and Health and Safety Manager up at Darwen, Terracotta. I moved into manufacturing from a youth work background 19 months ago. So my job entails working in both science and art, and it gets smashed together. That's what I get to do. And for me it's really, really important to be one, representing women in the manufacturing industry, but also I do all the school visits and things, and specifically try and target the young ladies because I think we need more young women in that industry.
Hello, my name's Sandra Dartnell and I work for Creative and Cultural Skills. When I was at school, I told my dad that computer art wasn't real art, and then I went on to study Latin American history and literature. And then I went on to be part of a female-led.com, which led me to then work on the building of creative interactive exhibits for places like the Science Museum and the Wellcome Trust. So it just shows you how confused and wrong everything can be at that kind of age. And so now I work for Creative and Cultural Skills, and I work with employers to help them to open up different routes into the creative industries for young people, and really to try and turn their organisations inside out so that people can see where all the jobs are and see where all the creative jobs are and all the blends of all of the other kind of functional and scientific jobs that might be in those industries.
Well, hi, I'm Kerry Harrison. I am the lead for the Lancashire Digital Skills Partnership, which is a trailblazer funded by the DCMS and sits within the Skills Hub of the Lancashire LEP. We are a collective of public, private and charity organisations who come together to try and address the digital skills gaps that are in Lancashire, ranging from looking at the future workforce in terms of those, the pipeline of skills coming out of the schools, colleges and universities, the existing workforce and their skills, as well as those who struggle to even know how to turn on a computer, let alone compare the market or find a cheap holiday. So it kind of covers a very wide range of focus on there. And obviously one of the issues is the diversity in the digital sector and actually looking at how we can improve things in that area. I have a background in education. I've worked both in FE colleges and I've been a senior leader in high schools. So I've kind of get that sector and how the problems that it kind of faces.
Good morning, my name's Daksha Patel and I'm an artist researcher, and most of my work engages with science and scientific institutions. So I've worked with places like the radiology department at Christie's, dermatology and neurology, imaging in the University of Manchester, applied maths at Bristol University, and I'm currently working with Dundee University on a Parkinson's disease research project. So cross-disciplinary dialogue is at the heart of my practice, and that involves sort of both parties really being a little bit out of their comfort zone and to see what emerges out of that experience.
Good morning, my name's Maid Dibley, so I work at Lancashire County Council and Lancashire LEP alongside Kerry and Ed, so I lead on digital innovation policy there. I guess doing similar things to Kerry, but more from sort of the business university side and how we can sort of enable businesses to be ready for I guess, more diverse candidates. And so a lot of conversations we have, particularly in this space, is around actually companies wanting to be more inclusive, but not knowing how or where to start. So a lot of what we do is kind of working out how we can get them to that stage because they need that help.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to hand you over to Helen and she's going to talk. I'm going to flick through a few slides if that's all right, to set the scene. A few things. Scientists, technicians, engineers, mathematicians, that's what we need for the future. STEM does stand for science, technology, engineering and maths, and A obviously for the arts into STEAM. The number of times people can't work out what the E is and they say it might be English does sort of frustrate me because it is definitely engineers that we need in this country. A few stats here. Manufacturing is dead. I hear that a lot. The Northwest actually is the centre of UK manufacturing industry. We are in the midst of a wealth of opportunities where we sit now. Lots of opportunities for young people. 60% of the current UK school population will be doing jobs that currently do not exist because of rapidly changing technology. This is an issue that we have. How do we inspire the next generation when we don't actually know what they're going to be doing yet? The UK needs apparently 1.5 million more STEM professionals by 2024. That's a stat that's come from UK Engineering, Tomorrow's Engineers nationally. This is because of changing technology, but also because it's an ageing workforce. I talk to a lot of organisations who will say over 50% of our workforce are over the age of 50. If you work within water treatment, you work in infrastructure, that's a serious issue for our society. 9% of the UK engineering workforce are women, according to WISE, Women in Science and Engineering. I studied engineering at Cambridge. I never like to say how long ago. I went nearly 30 years ago now. That makes me feel very, very old. I don't think the situation has changed significantly since then. We are 28th out of the 28 EU countries for women in STEM. Now, coming out of the EU is going to solve that stat, but I don't think that's the way I would like that stat to be solved. Doesn't make very comfortable reading. Now, this does not include anything medical related, but 0.6% of girls at 11 will go on to university to study anything technical at university. That is absolutely shocking. Shocking. STEM is everywhere, and that, I think, is what we need to get to the crux of. STEM is, and STEAM is there for society, from aerospace engineers to zoologists. I could have written 3,000 slides listing the jobs that STEM is in. And I always challenge people to say, name your job that doesn't include maths. I think you'd be hard-pressed to say that. And I think we need to raise that awareness, not just with the girls, but with all young people and with their influences. And I think that is really, really important. I would love to increase more women in STEM because I think more women in STEM breeds more women in STEM because we support each other. But I would like to see more young people realising that STEM and STEAM is everywhere and choosing that as a career. I do an awful lot of work, and again, it's possibly not too appropriate here, but the slide's there, so I'll talk about it for a second. A lot of the work that goes on within schools is focused at young people when they're making either their options choices or they're looking at their next steps post-16. It's far too late. A lot of research shows that by the age of 5 to 7 years old, young people have already made their mind up regarding the types of people that do certain jobs. Now, that's not to say they've decided what they want to do, but they've already decided that potentially engineering and science is for the boys at the age of 5. That is a shocking, shocking statistic. So I do a lot of work. I said I work with bits and bobs. We've also we've designed a resource which is called Engineering Fairy Tales, which one of our organisations, Johnson Matthey Chemicals at Clitheroe, have kindly sponsored, that the book will go in all Lancashire libraries, because we really feel that young people, young girls, need to be engaging with STEM and STEAM from a very early age alongside their parents and their carers. Because if a girl comes home from school and says, "Mum, I've met a scientist or an engineer and it's really cool and I'm really interested in that," the last thing you want is whoever is at home to say, "I really don't want you doing that, that's not for girls." So we do need to tackle both. So that's my stats. I'm going to sort of throw it back to you. But we've got a problem. That's what I want to say. We've got a problem. There's a lot of work going on, but we've got an awfully long way to go.
Yeah, so we're now going to talk about some of the issues and barriers that, I suppose women in STEAM and STEM face. And from a personal perspective, so I am a scientist by trade, and I now have the privileged position of leading and growing a robotics company. How cool is that? I am like the hero to my kids. They think I'm the best person in the world, although not very happy that I don't take them to work. I never thought I would be in that situation, because actually a couple of years ago I was made redundant, and I was made redundant whilst on maternity leave. And one of the things that actually I faced as a woman is what's known as, what we call it as the leaky pipeline. So I got in there, I got into STEAM, and I absolutely always wanted to be a scientist. I always wanted to work with making things and being part of that manufacturing community. I almost left, and I did. I'm just lucky that I found it again, because of some of the challenges that I faced at key junctures in my life. And I suppose from a personal perspective, actually, as a young person, if I think about some of the conversations I have with my kids, is that understanding the importance of resilience and actually how things do sometimes knock you off course, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't then follow your passion. And that's been one of my barriers as a woman in STEAM. I didn't have a challenge getting into it. I always wanted to do it. I was very lucky to have a lot of role models of various different, I suppose, across lots of different age ranges and that were very diverse. But yeah, I almost left, which made me really sad at the time. So I kind of wanted to open the floor to you guys to, what's been your barrier to kind of, or challenges with being a woman in STEAM?
Well, interestingly, the stereotypes kind of reversed for me. So I was, so being an Asian woman, and when I was at school, when I was a girl, the expectation and the stereotype was that I would go into science. So I had to actually fight really hard to go into art. But I would say that, this was a long time ago, so I did O-levels and not GCSEs. At that time, you had to do 3 separate subjects. So I did all 3, physics, chemistry and biology. And because so few girls took all 3, I ended up in a class in history where it was all boys and I was the only girl in the class. And that put me off, definitely, because I felt uncomfortable. But what I would say, following on from the questions that you posed, was that when I go into the barriers that, as an artist going into a scientific institution, it's quite scary. You don't understand the terminology. They're very, very specialist fields, and they throw a lot of jargon at you. And what I'm always trying to do is listen underneath the terminology for the big questions, because that's what I'm interested in as an artist, the context. Because science, after all, goes into the world. It changes the world in dramatic ways. And I think that's what young people would be interested in. So rather than the stereotype of science as, oh, well, if you go into it, you have to follow very strict protocols and it's very kind of structured, very kind of dry, abstract. I what I find is what's really interesting is that scientists are continually engaging with ambiguity and with the unknown, and actually with big questions. If they are there, they may not be spoken, but they are there, and that's what I try to tease out. And I think the more that we can take that into schools, the more exciting it would be for young people. Just put those big things out there, even at quite a young age.
Yeah, I agree, because I think there's an awful lot of engagement and work going on with schools, but I think we have to be careful that we don't become part of the problem and that we aren't reinforcing stereotypes with what we're actually saying to young people, especially because the stats show, and you know, we've got people around the table who work within the IT industry, you know, the world is changing. So what we don't want to do is to go in there and put our view of the world, because I'm getting on a bit now, and, you know, things will look very different in 20, 30 years. I'm going to say something slightly controversial, because I was talking to the ladies because I said I would. What we're trying to do is we're trying to increase that pond of people that are interested in STEM and pursuing STEM further, whether they are girls or whether they are boys, whatever field, increasing the diversity within the workforce and ensuring that even if we still have a leaky pipeline, that pipeline is far bigger than historically it has been.
So it's not an issue.
So it's not an issue, and there's more people going through. I think those young people that are interested in STEM and STEAM will find their way into STEM and STEAM anyway. It's the young people that have never considered it, or the influencers of those young people who think it's not for my family, it's not for my children. So we have to be careful about the messages that we convey. And this is the slightly controversial comment, and I'm not getting at anybody. But obviously, we were all invited to come today to have a Women in STEAM, how can we change things perspective. And when I had a look at the Eventbrite ticket, the picture that was chosen to advertise the session is a welder. Now, for me, that is interesting, because is that the message that we want to be saying to young people that STEM is in these days? For me, STEM is about making prosthetics, looking at food manufacturing, looking at cosmetics, fashion, technical textiles, looking at environmental issues and that bigger picture. And I think that goes with the arts, the creative, the problem solving, the issues around STEAM that I think we should be talking about far more, to encourage young people to say, I didn't realise, and that's really interesting, and that's for me. I started my career in charge of after treatment and emissions, so catalysts for Ford Motor Company, doing a similar job to which Volkswagen got hammered for cheating for emissions. I don't know if people saw it in the news. That's what I did for Ford. I've gone through my career journey that I now work within a creative industry for the BBC on a programme for preschoolers. Now, my STEM background has meant that whatever issues I've had during my life, doors have always been open to me, and I think that's a really powerful message to say to young people. You know, we're talking about gender imbalance, pay gaps, etc. If you've got STEM and STEAM qualifications, you will always be able to find work, and work that is valued and relatively highly paid.
I want to see the other side of things. I want to see, like, the person who's trained as an artist being able to get into Ford and that way happen as well, which I don't know if it's true that can happen, but I would think that one of my fears as a young person would have been that if I'd not taken science subjects, that door was totally shut. And I don't know if that's different.
Yeah, and it is different. Sorry, it is different. And certainly we always used to laugh as engineers and senior engineers within Ford, because there was a separate building on site. Ford have a research centre at Dunton in Essex, which is where I was based and where all the research and design was held. Separate building called the Design Centre. Us minions weren't allowed in the design centre. That was for the clever artists to design what the vehicles of the future would look like. So yes, there's a huge opportunity within that field. And I think, you know, people have said to me before, you're either scientific or you're creative. Absolutely
I
not.
disagree with that. I was going to pick up on that.
Absolutely not. It should be tied together, because ergonomics, the beauty of design, is normally the best design by what it looks like.
So, yeah. I was thinking about the barriers in my life. I'd kind of go back to what you were saying, in that took 3 sciences at GCSE, and I was the only girl in my physics class. I remember a very embarrassing time at Sellafield Nuclear Power Station where I was in a line with all the lads on a trip and realised they were lining up for the toilet and had to move away quickly. But as I was the only girl, shuffled away quietly. But when I took my options, I had to make a decision between art or science, and I couldn't do both. And I think, you know, retrospectively, that is a shame, really, that opportunity didn't avail itself to me in the options. I also wanted to do metalwork, and I couldn't fit that in either. So banging, you know, there was lots of options that you just couldn't do, and that limits the kind of things that you would have done.
Just picking up on, you know, what you were saying, when you get young people, young women who, if they know they want to go into STEM or STEAM, they eventually will do. When I was at school, I did my work experience at Lookers in Blackburn because I wanted to be a mechanic. And I'd wanted to be a mechanic since I was about 9 or 10 years old. So I'd spent all this time, and when it came round to it, and I'm like, no, I want to be a mechanic. And I went with a young man who was in my class, so we were both 15. He got to do all the really fancy, you know, the cool stuff. He learned how to change the spark plugs, and he was doing stuff with bumpers and all the rest of it. I got sent to the butter shop, I got to make the coffees, and I got to sweep up. So I did 4 days of my 2 weeks. And after that, I was just completely put off. Now, we're 16 years later, and I've gone back into it. But for a lot of young women, because it was such a negative thing, you know, they might never ever go back into it. And my thing is some of the barriers and whatnot is, why weren't the teachers saying, right, well, you and Tom were doing the same job. Yeah. Why did you have this really bad experience and he had a really positive one? You know, and I think that's a really big barrier, that there's especially in schools and things, a lot of teachers that aren't looking at it from an equality point of view and picking up on little things like that.
And sadly, Louise, sorry, Philippa, I think that's still quite relevant today. So I don't know if anyone saw this month a primary school in Spalding, Lincolnshire, and we're doing a learning experience opportunity with the local grammar school. It was aimed at Year 4 students. The girls were offered drama and food technology. The boys were offered double science and technology. So, you know, what seems like a great experience for young people, come and see what we do at high school, come and have a taste today. From Louise's experience, in some areas it's not getting any better. In fact, it's getting worse.
So Lucy, from your perspective, I suppose through the involvement you do with the Saturday Club, what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the Saturday Club sits outside of the school curriculum, and it takes place on a Saturday, so it's a voluntary process, and young people choose which programmes they attend. We find that across the programme, in total, across the art and design, science and engineering, fashion and business, and writing and talking, we have 78% young women that take part in the programme. In the science and engineering programme, we have 45% young women, 55% men, so it's actually a very good statistic in terms of gender equality. Obviously, it would be great if it was 50-50, but we're not far off. I think what's interesting is obviously that this is very much outside of the stereotypes. So the whole way that the programme is focused really is on problem solving, innovation, entrepreneurship, creativity, design-led thinking. The programme is, there's no examinations. Each week the young people attend and they address different projects. But key to the whole programme is an introduction to young people of the breadth of careers open to them. And the way that this is approached is very much through partnerships with industry. So they actually have masterclasses with role models who are working within different industry sectors. And I think, you know, really, and this is something that Helen was saying really, is that STEM is everywhere, STEAM is everywhere, that the breadth of roles available to young people are endless. And, you know, it's not necessarily realistic to expect teachers who are very much stuck in the classroom and delivering the curriculum to know or be aware of the breadth of careers out there. And some of the teachers that we do talk to and work with are very conscious of that, because they're not working in industry, they're not aware of the speed of technology change and things, so they're not able to necessarily always make young people aware of the breadth of careers open to them. So what we tend to find is that through the programme and over the course of a year, young people will grow in confidence. They have an ability, I mean, there's a lot of anxiety around with young people as well, so it's also about just building their confidence within education outside of a more structured environment. And a lot of them comment on the freedom that they have to explore ideas and also to make mistakes, to actually experiment, rather than kind of being corralled through a kind of tested examination process. I think one of the things we find which is our biggest challenge is actually around ensuring diversity across the whole of the programme. So for us, that's really the focus that we're looking on, is widening participation across BAME, young people from lower socio-economic backgrounds, which we measure through free school meals, young people who've experienced care, disability, and young people who would effectively be first-generation university attendees. And the figure that we are really struggling most to actually increase is young people on free school meals, and particularly, obviously, across the programme, young men, or young boys, 13 to 16. So it's a slightly different picture, because obviously, well, I mean, I think it's a positive picture in terms of women in STEM, in the sense we have 45% young people engaging in, 45% women engaging in science and engineering. But I think for us, it's really about opening up young people to the breadth of careers open to them, enthusing them in the diversity and the importance of creative thinking, design-led thinking in all subjects, so that they're not kind of limited to this very channeled way of understanding science and engineering and maths and technology, that actually these are secure professions, that you get paid well, that they're creative, that there's a whole breadth of opportunities open to them, and also that there isn't one set pathway, that most of us will have decided to do one thing, you know, had a number of different turns in our career path. And so we find that through, firstly, entering a university or college, that's a really important moment of breaking a barrier down for young people. A lot of them will have never been in that environment before. They have the opportunity to use facilities in universities and colleges which they wouldn't have come across in school, and that really opens their eyes to some of the facilities open, different subjects open to them in science and engineering in particular. And then the masterclasses with industry partners really opens them up to the role, different roles available. So it's very much about kind of creating a more accessible environment for young people to engage in the opportunities open to them.
So when we go back to the conversation around stereotypes and the stereotypes that we've all been fitted into, or people kind of see, what are people's views on that? What do we think that those, I suppose, what is the reality versus those stereotypes? Is there an opportunity and a need to have more balanced, or actually should that be more targeted at specific sectors? So we're talking about women today, but actually we know that there's a challenge with people from different backgrounds as well.
I think we all suffer from unconscious bias. You know, I think it's unfortunately in our DNA, and we can try to consciously think about our perceptions and our views, but it does rise up. I would like to not necessarily focus on that, but look at how we get around that by providing positive opportunities, in the sense that I think rather than necessarily talking about women in STEAM when we're interacting with young people, just having women from STEAM talking about their jobs, their experiences, their backgrounds, their pathways, and working alongside the young people will inherently help with that gender bias misconception anyway. I mean, I'd like to just pick up a little bit about what you said as well. You know, you mentioned the word skills, and I think, you know, in this ever-changing world where we don't know how to prepare our young people for the future, employability skills are central. They need to run through everything. And I think including in those employability skills, it's about communication, it's about resilience, it's about teamwork, creative thinking, etc. So I would say getting role models who represent gender diversity, ethnicity, etc., to work alongside young people, doing activities that help them develop their skills, gives that whole round preparedness for the future.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Sorry.
I was just going to jump on that and say I absolutely agree. I have a sports science background in that area, and one of the best successful campaigns ever run by Sport England to get people involved in sport has been This Girl Can. Yeah. And primarily that has been because they showed real people doing activities, and it wasn't all sport. And that was the first time Sport England have done an advertising campaign like that, where they've done activities and they've seen people with wobbly bits and celebrated the wobbly bits, running and swimming and diversity. And there is a lot of evidence to show that the more that you can identify with that role model, that the more you are likely to follow in those steps. Yes. So I definitely think role models from all different types of backgrounds, all different types of areas, but real people that they can see is such an important part of it.
And I think just highlighting bits, you would not believe how long we had a conversation with the BBC about whether bits should be wearing pink or not, because I think we also assume that if women are interested in STEM and STEAM, effectively you're losing your femininity for some reason, and that's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, you know, I love pink. We know Miranda certainly likes pink. You know, I've got a bit of a problem, my husband would say, about shoes, but I'm also an engineer, and it's about embracing that, isn't it, and showing young girls and all young people that we are just like them, with all my wobbly bits and my
So just thinking about, I suppose, your experience when you were at work, your work experience.
Yeah.
If at that time we said, right, there's a young woman in STEM event, and it's about pioneering young women, do you think that would have interested you? Or?
Oh yeah, definitely. I was really lucky, because off the back of that, I was part of a pioneering group of young people who actually set up Connections Lancashire. So I went from that and decided that my path was to go into working with young people. So in a way, it was a good thing. It's taken me a long time to go back into something that I enjoy, but I do think sometimes things happen for a reason. I think if teachers had noticed it and whatnot, then I may have just carried on and became a mechanic. Yeah, if there had been an event on, where I would see other women talking about it and things, yeah, it probably would have inspired me.
Do we think that should be exclusive to women, to get that inspiration?
Also, do you think that if you'd have just gone into a situation and been treated equally,
it
wouldn't have even mattered if it wouldn't have been supported by men?
No, it wouldn't have. Can I just say, I heard a thing a few years ago, and it's always stuck with me, about teachers, with us talking about education and stuff. And I remember I was at a university talking about something with some young women, and somebody, it was a member of faculty staff, said to me that about how teachers, female teachers, are just women with failed careers. So, when we're talking about education and stuff, I think sometimes there's a lot of negative thing about teachers who have had a background in STEM and STEAM and whatnot, that they just end up, because they've had children or, they've been married or whatever, the hours aren't right, that they just tend to go into education. So I think when I talk to a lot of young people who might want to go into education, they're not even considering the other stuff, because they're just saying, well, why wait until I'm 40 to become a teacher when I can do it at 21? I'm throwing a bit of a spanner in the works.
Interesting. Interesting. I don't know if there's something about, I'm not an expert on the curriculum, but something about the way in which science is taught in schools. Because my memory was that there was a specific approach, which was very sort of testing based.
Yeah.
It did not contextualize, it didn't make sense of science in the world. And I think when I go into scientific institutions, more and more, they are collaborating with different disciplines. It's just how science is done nowadays. And often they're out of their comfort zones, because they all have been taught from different disciplines, so they're coming in with different terminologies themselves. I wonder if in schools, if we just could bring science into everything, if you're reading a sort of English and something about the landscape comes up, and you go into the science of geology. It's just that it's so that it becomes naturalized. That science is not different from anything else you do. If you get them really young, why would that? Maybe that will help to break down the barriers. And I do think that the way we measure and test science and the curriculum, it put me off. I didn't find it. I learned how exciting STEM subjects are after I left school, when I went into these institutions. And, you know, it's really exciting stuff, but I don't think you always get a taste of that.
And I think part of that is putting the onus on to employers, because I think we've got quite a nice opportunity at the moment where we've got incredibly low unemployment, and actually across Lancashire there's a lot of, particularly in STEM and manufacturing, there's a lot of employers struggling to employ, and actually a lot of, as I mentioned before, a lot of what we're seeing in terms of the demands of how do we create a more inclusive workforce is actually just a demand thing. It's literally they need more employees, so they're forced to now, where they might not have done it for kind of better, you know, more kind of sort of nicer reasons. They're now forced to do that, and I think it's about putting onus on those employers, because like you say, it brings it to life if they can go into those schools. And obviously Kerry's doing amazing work kind of getting those links more, and I think actually the more that we can put it, because you'll get a lot of employers who will, you know, can complain they're not getting the right people out of schools, but it's actually, I think we're seeing a bit of a shift now where we're starting to say, look, if you need that staff to grow, then it's on, we'll help you, we'll give you the best practice, but you've actually got to go and do the process of, you know, taking the work experience, doing the placements. And I think there's an opportunity right now with unemployment being so low that employers are more willing to do that in a way that they weren't probably 5 or 10 years ago. And it's about how I think our kind of organisations can actually say, right, if you're at that point, what can we do to help you make a better work experience programme, or whatever that is, that's more inclusive, and get into schools and link them up.
You know, you just briefly touched around arts. So we're a robotics company, and obviously science and engineering is the core of what we do. And it's a team of 9, and they were all engineers. One of the things that we talked about is that we have a role to play about the stories of robots and the stories of manufacturing. So I've appointed, and I've got a storyteller who's just joined the company. He's absolutely never done anything in science and engineering, and he's just fascinated by tech. And what we're really excited about, actually, he's going to start to tell our story. And actually the conversations with Ben is that Ben was like, when he did his creative writing degree at Lancashire, I don't think he ever thought he'd be in the position that he's in. But actually that's a fundamental role now, I think, and for the future of science and engineering. And that's about the arts and the science working together. So yes, he can't program a robot and he can't code, but actually what he's very, very good at is writing stories and working collaboratively with the engineers to further that kind of an inspiration.
The Tech Nation report says something like 60% of women, some ridiculous, of young girls rather, say that they will not go, that they don't go into digital careers because it's not things that people do, not things people do like, you know, that they do, people like them do. And actually, when you look at the types of careers that do exist within the digital field particularly, there is digital content makers, there is an English degree or some kind of creative writing degree is the perfect route into that. And I just think we spend a lot of time closing doors mentally without actually realising that that links to this and that links to that. And part of that, I do agree that teachers do an amazing job, and this is not teacher bashing by any stretch, but they only know what they know, and they don't necessarily know the full extent of an industry, nor can they really take that on board. We've just done a project around T-levels, the technical level qualifications that are coming out, around the digital industry, running masterclasses and industry days for the teachers who are going to be delivering that, to try and address some of that, so they can go in, have a look around an organisation, see how it actually works, and then hear from the people in that industry actually how it actually works and what they're looking. The interesting thing for me was actually how they recruit people into that workforce and the pathways that people went in, and that to me was the biggest eye-opener for the people who were present. And we've had something like 130 teachers and 70 companies across Lancashire involved in that programme, and it was only for 3 months that we ran it, and we're now looking at how we can roll it out across other industries. But it was an eye-opener for some people, and it really helped in that advice and guidance and understanding that can go out to young people.
See, we use the terminology in STEM and from STEM. So in STEM is that you're working within the STEM sector, and from STEM means you've got a STEM background and then go potentially into the STEM sector. I think a lot of the education system potentially think that STEM industries only employ STEM people. A lot of teachers I talk to, and it's about us helping them see the wider picture. Again, this is not a teacher bashing exercise, but they would think organisations who are typical engineering companies only want engineers, but they need HR, accountants, marketing, PR, they need they need a whole breadth. A lot of these organisations are mini industries. So we, with our STEM Ambassador scheme, we don't just recruit people who have STEM qualifications and STEM backgrounds. We have people who are passionate about science, technology, engineering, maths and the arts to shout about it. But can I just literally pick up quickly on the point that you mentioned about employers have a responsibility? I absolutely agree with that. I also think, though, that there's two sides to that argument, and I think one of the big issues, and I feel that we need a game changer from an education perspective, is that until there is time and space in the curriculum to support teachers to understand about the wider view of what the real world of STEM and STEAM looks like, and also time for them to work with their pupils, looking at employability skills and creating young people that are fit for work, then we're going to just be fluffing around the edges. There's a lot of employers that are really keen to get involved. We book things with schools, and then because of senior leadership directives, everything is cancelled. 24 hours to go. Oh, sorry, you can't come in. Well, we were bringing Siemens and IBM and DXC technology, and we were going to do a fantastic day. Oh, sorry, we've been told we can't take them out. That is a big issue. That is a really big issue, and I think that affects a lot of the level of engagement that potentially employers could get involved in. So I think government, central government, we need a game changer. We need some space.
I can kind of add to that in terms of the impact that some of these the companies can have with young people in schools. So very recently, me and a couple of my colleagues, we ran an activity in the school in Chorley, which was all around virtual reality. So we had a bit of a talk with young people, and we got them up and actually got using headsets and talking about application in the real world. My bugbear is going to a careers fair, seeing a 3D printer, and it's printing out Yoda pencil toppers, and it's not starting the conversation about prosthetics and changing the world and how we can produce medicine across the world in low income. But in this VR workshop, we called up a volunteer from the audience, a girl in year 6. She put on the headset on and she talked about everything she could see really confidently to all of her peers. Her teacher said afterwards, that girl has never spoken before. She doesn't speak to any of the pupils, she doesn't speak to the teachers, and she's very quiet at home. So that's kind of the impact that what we hear today can really do.
I think it's also about the inspiration of what you don't, that age-old adage of you don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
And understanding, actually, that's something that I'd never thought about before. So I think we need to inspire those young people and say, actually, this could be a career. You could be building this. You could, you're looking around a virtual world. Someone's actually designed that, and the whole behind the scenes of that, and then go back into the sales. But also, I think we need to be talking to parents about that as well. We've sort of touched on it already, but I'd love to see that with the parents in the background. Being invited to those events.
I think that it's true. You don't know what you don't know. It's we have to be fair to the teachers that they have that as well. And I think that there's a kind of a siloing of like what's a careers event and what isn't. And I feel that there are quite a lot of opportunities that my children have where people come into the school, and sometimes an author will come in and they'll tell you that they've written a book called The Itchysaurus about eczema because they're a doctor. But that's because they tell the people, not because the teacher says, while you're here talking about your book, can you tell us about your career? And I just think people need to be, by default, teachers need to be told that anybody who comes into the school from the outside needs to say what they do, so that the kids can go off and Google it, because they will, and then they'll find a YouTube video about it, and then they're into a whole new world. And
it's maximising opportunities, isn't it?
And I think one of the challenges is when they go home and go, I met this drone pilot today and he's doing this and that, the parent just goes, that's not a proper job. And then that kind of squashes it down straight away. It's that kind of understanding of, as we go into a world which we don't know what the jobs are or the future kind of thing, that we need the parents to be able to have the confidence to actually encourage that exploration and not to fear it.
So is there any thoughts from the audience at all around this?
Last week I attended the Festival of Business in Manchester. I think the lead speaker was the young mayor, Gemma. It was very interesting. And I attended one of the breakout sessions in the afternoon, and it was male dominated. And at the end, I just got married to say something, but the theme was that entrepreneurship was squashed down. It wasn't talked about at school when people are up and coming. It was the reserve of mature people. And the curriculum was mentioned as well. And my comment was, I can recommend the TED talk of Professor Sir Ken Robinson. Our schools can creativity.
Yeah, absolutely.
If anybody knows it, it was made about 10 years ago, I think, but it's still valuable today. It's the most viewed TED of all time, and it's very inspiring. Our schools killing creativity.
Yeah, that's a good talk.
The TED Talks are brilliant, aren't they?
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen it, there's another TED Talk about a marshmallow challenge, which is worth Googling and having a look, and that's very interesting because what they did was they put groups of people together they build a tower with spaghetti, put a marshmallow on the top, one of the standard mini STEM activities potentially that schools do. But what they did was they compared the outcomes from chief execs, graduates of business school and primary aged children, and the primary aged children had the best outcome of the lot. So what we're saying is that young people have that natural exploration, interest of the world, that make or break, tearing things apart. How does it work? And unfortunately, we're teaching that out of them. So by the time they get to secondary, we are unfortunately spoon feeding them, which is why 68% of our employers are saying that they can't find people with the correct skills once they come out of education.
Kerry Harrison used as an example Julian Lynn, the artistic director who worked on Cats. She died recently. And he worked with her on the board of the Royal Dance School. And he asked her how she got into dance. And as a child, up to the age of 8, she just could not concentrate at school. She would be castigated for being disruptive, and she couldn't concentrate. Mother took her to the doctor and listened to everything, and it took her out of the room, left the radio on in the room, and they watched what Julian did, and she just got up and started dancing. He said, that's what your daughter needs. She needs to go to a dance school. And as we all know, how she learned, and he said, rather than give her injections and categorise her as deficit disorder, look where she is now. That's due to somebody being creative and thinking outside of the box, and that was in the 1930s. Yeah. Suggested so. It's very good TED.
Hi ladies, it's been great this morning, except for the rain of course. My name's Bev Wood, and I've been in the creative industry for 32 years. I've got my own design practice on the Fylde Coast, but I'm also an advocate for the A in STEM. I'm really keen that is a STEAM going forward. One thing that I think, and I've got two, I call centennials, well, a millennial and a centennial, the new buzzwords. They are really interested in mobility. I'm also working at the University of Central Lancashire, so I'm surrounded by the sort of 18 or 19 to 24-year-olds. So you get a kind of feel for what they want. And often as teachers, employers, we don't ask the audience, we don't ask the children. So I don't know how the panellists feel about how you engage an audience that live on social media, that see Kim Kardashian as a kind of job role, and all of these kind of interesting things. I mean, Brian Cox has been great, hasn't he? Because he's interested a whole generation, because he's gone a bit he's a bit geeky, but he's now a bit of a celeb. In fact, I went to his event actually at Manchester Arena and was absolutely blown away that the whole arena was full. I came away a bit kind of bamboozled with the black hole thing, but the room was full of parents with children. And to me, really, it's how do the panellists feel about how we take education to children in a format that they would like to be taught, because we're doing it old school. So I just wonder what the panel thought about that.
Yeah. I
think one thing I'd say back to that, so I, separately from my day job, I sit on the national board of Girl Guides, Girl Scouts, and I think one of the things we have conversations about a lot there, which we don't do perfectly either, but there's something about spaces and about, we often create spaces for young people, but we don't let them create their own space. And I think it's something that we have to get better at, and actually it ultimately comes back to creativity, is actually... and I was speaking to a fairly senior sort of woman in tech recently about this, and it was amazing because I was sort of saying this to her, and she said, God, you blow my mind, because basically she was saying, my daughter wouldn't take part in the school show, and I didn't know why, and I really wanted her to, because I wanted to be creative and have an outlet, and I was really disappointed. And you've just made me realise that she said two weeks ago she came to me and wanted to enter Junior Bake Off, and I just rolled my eyes and said, why on earth would you want to do that? You know, why? And she was like, what you've made me realise is that was her creativity, that was her idea that she'd come with, and actually we are incredibly bad, and it's because we're trying to be efficient and kind of create as many spaces as we can, but we create these spaces that we want to protect our kids, and we talked, you said before about stereotype threat and stuff, we're trying to create these perfect spaces where they're going to learn, and I think we have to get a lot better, and actually if they come to us with an idea, it's about us facilitating that idea, not about setting it off and then them choosing what they want.
A load of law students with creatives, and just one subject. Why is terms of reference this thick and boring as? Because nobody wants to read them. And all our creative students are saying, well, actually, why is it like that? And all the law students, we need to get this across and that across. And the students were going, well, can't we do it in an icon? And can't we write it here? Why can't it be a digital thing? Can't it be a flip book? Yep. And it was just, I stood back and watched that disruption in play, because actually, that's what we've got to do. We've got to create the environment for the disruption, and then absorb what comes from it, and then form the next courses and the next curriculums and all the rest of it. We're doing it the wrong way around, because the next generation are way ahead. I mean, I'm quite old and fuddy-duddy really compared to my children. And, you know, they don't think anything of, they don't have plan B, C, D and Z. They have plan A, that's it. Because they rely on tech. You know, well, why do I need to print out my boarding pass, Mum? It's on my app. Well, what if your phone dies? Well, it won't. I've got a battery backup thing, or I'll find a Wi-Fi thing, or they're just the confidence.
For me, when you talk about something like that, I'm thinking, well, do you then connect that? Well, that's entrepreneurship. That's a new market. That's like something that people could go off and explore as a business venture, you know. And I think that's might excite them even more once that disruption's kind of happened.
It's what you were saying, though. Sorry, I think it was. Is it Janet? Kerry. We're just saying how. When I came a bit like you from a background where I was a very good scientist, and I've gone down an art route because I couldn't do science and art together. I was a fabulous chemist when I look back, and I've used still kind of a bit nerdy really with the tech side of things I'm interested in, but I went down an art route because I couldn't merge them together. Well, students today, their question is, why not? You know,
I think we need to offer that flexibility to them, because, you know, if employers are saying that they can't pick, you know, people ideal for the job, it's because we're becoming a bit of a cookie cutter, and we've got a production line, because we've conformed the space and what we think people should be learning and young people should be learning at all the different stages. We're popping out this cookie cutter set of young people that don't have the right skills, but then also aren't necessarily aligned to everyone else. But I think it's that flexibility, to have that creativity, but to mix everything up. I mean, one of the things I ended up doing, I wasn't allowed to do electronics in school. I got told, oh, because you're a girl, you're not allowed to do it. So then that just spurred me on to do that in future life. And I think, what are we going to end up with if we're telling young people now, these are only the jobs that you can do, and not having that flexibility and that creativity to kind of find out what the next thing is, what they want to do. They might be the new entrepreneurs that set up these extra new 60% of new jobs that don't exist yet, because they're the ones that have got the inspiration to be different, be creative.
So I think you had something to say, didn't you?
Yeah, I just wanted to reflect on how it's interesting that we started off talking about women in STEM, and now we're all talking about creativity and just being completely open to saying, and I think that's what it boils down to. It's interesting that we didn't really pull out that exclusive event women-only thing, which, judging by, it doesn't really help the amount of women that are in the room today, because we've labelled it as women in STEM. And I've also got two boys, And I think it's really important that we empower everybody. And I think that seems to be what everyone's saying, that it's actually just saying you can do anything. I was brought up that way. I studied maths, biology and art at A-level. I was allowed to do cross-section. I'm now an artist who uses technology. Do a whole mixture. And my son wanted to apply for Bake Off and I let him. I didn't say that's going to be known job. I just wanted to bring that in. I just feel like that seems to be where we've come to, and I think that's a really good place to be.
Yeah. I think there's a danger though with this, that we can lose sight of the process. So rather than focus on, well, you could do this, you could do that, I think when you're young, it's quite rare to know exactly what you want to do. But the process of experimenting with stuff, that creative, whether it's digital or with actual materials, and I think that's been killed out of schools, that time and energy, and that is actually science.
Yeah, I agree, because I think you're very much in a rush. That's the trouble now. We're trying to get them through all this stuff that we're trying to cram in, and I think you made the point, you used the word tell. I think we've got to be very careful that we don't tell young people what opportunities there are, what jobs we think will be good for them. You know, I think what we don't have, unfortunately, and I think that's why I feel that the school curriculum needs to be changed, is give these young people, especially the ones that don't particularly have maybe great role models outside school, give them the time to think, well, what sort of person am I? What environment would I be good in? You know, am I outdoorsy? Am I into my tech? You know, do I like to work with people? And it's creating that foundation, especially when young people, and you mentioned it as well, you know, they've got a real issue about sense of image, they're trying to find their way in the world. Give them time to understand the type of person they are before we start giving them suggestions of where we feel they would fit.
So we've got 10 minutes left. Sorry, there's
Morning, everybody. I'm Stuart. I work with Lancashire Skills Hub and the Careers Enterprise Company. So I manage and work with a team of people supporting 130 schools across Lancashire on the career strategy, where I'm going to have to go in about 15 minutes from helping one. Your point that you made about the curriculum,
yes,
it's bob on. The frustration that I see over and over again in schools is the sheer frustration that they'd like to get employees in, they want to do the creativity, they want to do the entrepreneurship, but they just haven't got the time. I'm a governor of a school. Funding's a major issue. Funding's reliant on academic performance. I went recently through head teacher appointments and they focus purely on previous Ofsted grades. So if you're a teacher and you're being measured on what your kids achieve, that's where your focus is going to be.
Very much so.
And I don't know the answer.
Yeah. And I think the new Gatsby benchmarks have allowed at least senior leadership teams in secondary school to start considering more engagement. But again, there's not any extra time. You know, I do think we need to change on both sides. And again, you know, maybe there's a levy to enable organisations to get involved in schools. Maybe there's something going on within the curriculum that puts employability, skills, personal development front and central, and we build around that. But something needs to change, or else in another 30 years, when I will then be really, really old, it still will not have changed. That's the frustration.
Sorry to cut it short. So we've got 10 minutes left. So I think we all discussed that, you know, it'd be really nice to kind of walk away with something. So I've been kind of making a few notes and touched on your point around, you know, the campaign that Sports England did around, you know, This girl can, and touched on your point around the fact that actually we've got some fantastic young people and assets in the region. You know, is there an opportunity to actually, there's a diverse number of role models here, and within the wider network, to almost kind of set that as a bit of a challenge. And I don't know what people think, or what is a good conclusion to this conversation as to, you know, an action that we actually do.
With STEM ambassadors,
yes,
are there any diversity targets, and does that get monitored so that it's...
We monitor it as part of our KPIs. So we have just under 2,000 STEM ambassadors for Lancashire and Cumbria. About 46% of those are women. About 19% of those are from BAME. So we have to try and get our numbers up. And obviously, if you compare it to the stats I showed at the beginning, with 9% of the STEM workforce being women, you can see that our demographic in our volunteers is significantly
You know,
higher.
like whether they kind of mobilise equally, and so, and if a school's had, I don't know, a man go in once, then the next time it's a bit.
So we did 40,000 volunteering hours last year. There's about 37,000 ambassadors nationally. That's a big project management, organisational issue if you drill it down to that. I think the issues that we've always had is that the schools that engage very well with industry continue to, and then it's the cold spots, the schools and the sectors that have historically not engaged that we still struggle with, and those are the ones we want to focus on. I would always welcome more people to the STEM Ambassador Scheme, because it then flags up to government the fantastic work and engagement that's going on. I always say to people, if you're really interested, become a CEC Careers Enterprise Advisor and also a STEM Ambassador. We're ticking all our boxes and we get stuck in. But yeah, going back to outcomes.
Yeah. So someone mentioned that actually young people are all over social media. And actually, whilst it would be great to be able to solve some of the more complex challenges in this conversation, we know we're not going to be able to do that, and that takes, I suppose, significant weight far beyond the weight that we've got here. But is there something that we can do directly through the National Festival of Making? Because actually there's a huge presence out there because of I suppose the strength of the characters that we've got involved to speak directly to those young people and inspire those generations with some of the stories that we've heard today. Is that a question?
I think you touched on it before about the why. I think the why is really important. I think we can all be more visible role models and tell people the positive things about what it is we do. But I think also it's the why. Why did we get into it? What change do we want to make? What difference do we want to make? How creative or technical do we have to be? Because I think those are the types of inspiration that any of us can share, regardless of what kind of department we're in.
I do also think we need to make more of a noise of what's actually going on, and I don't think we necessarily capitalise that, whether it be through various media streams, radio, etc., because we've not just got young people as the stakeholders, we've got young people, their influences, the education staff and industry. Yes, so we've got different groups, and I do think we need to make an awful lot more noise, and I think certainly, the LEP are doing a lot of engagement with schools, but that is not necessarily just STEM. I do a lot of STEM and STEAM, and I'm not sure necessarily at times how visible the work that we're doing in the STEM sector is with the LEP. I mean, I'd love an outcome of this to be that, maybe we can shout a bit more internally about the actual STEM Ambassador programme and what my wonderful employers are doing. So I really welcome the opportunity to be here with...
And we can link that into the Digital Skills Partnership as well, so we can continue that conversation about how that fits in, because digital is obviously an important part of that.
And I don't think we should just be expending lots of energy and multiplication.
Can I be the A a minute?
Yeah. I'm Ruth Raven, and I wanted to pick up on, or ask Liz a question actually, which I understand that Digital Lancashire actually send and match local digital employers with schools so that they can go in and be a champion.
Yeah,
Is that right, Tom? I believe you do it, don't you?
Tom's our chair, sat at the back.
And so what I'm thinking is that women, role models, positive ones like ourselves, could be matched with local schools and go in and talk to kids about the opportunities, be a positive role model. I know it's a voluntary thing, it doesn't cost anything, but it has some impact, and it does mean that Tom can go into, is it Cardinal Newman you go to? And then talk to local pupils about going into digital, what the jobs are, what the opportunities are. So perhaps Creative Lancashire could do something similar.
Definitely. I think I'd like to see a lot more Digital Lancashire and Creative Lancashire partner up.
I mean, we can link that.
We could all be STEM ambassadors as well at the same time, because it's free of charge, and
And I think also there's other organisations out there that maybe, you know, if you're talking to people who aren't in the STEAM sector, there's Founders for Schools, which is a national project that I'm involved with, which is about business owners and business leaders being linked with schools. So there's so much, absolutely, let's not reinvent the wheel, what's already there, and how can we
in terms of that, in Lancashire, we have the Enterprise Advisors Network, which Stuart obviously was saying before he runs. That company that runs that, and the group that runs that, have a campaign at the moment called Give an Hour. And the idea is to pledge that you will go into schools and give an hour to discuss whatever careers. You can sign up to be involved in that, either talk to Stuart, but we will have something called the Skills Pledge on the Lancashire Skills Hub website, and you can go through the Skills Pledge to actually say, I will give an hour. So if everybody here, for example, did that, that would be a fabulous action.
But we can build the network as well, it doesn't have to just be the people in the room, does it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's clear that what we need is a huge ideological shift in society and a cultural change where parents, teachers, careers advisors, all, you know, but, you know, we're talking about a huge kind of paradigm shift in people understanding what careers are at the moment, you know, whether it's in digital, creative, engineering. A lot of people just don't understand how fast these things are moving and how quickly they're changing. And how could they? You know, how could they? But also we've got an education system that is under-resourced and underappreciated, and so there's a political change that needs to take place. And we can't, you know, change the world today, but I think if we did all pledge some time to go in to talk to young people in schools about the opportunities that we see and maybe inspire them, then that would be a good start. And if we can sign up and then encourage 2 or 3 friends, a bit of pyramid selling, and get them to sign up. But, you know, it's just about that encouraging or sharing that information about the enterprise advisors. Who are they? Where are they? How do we contact them?
So we've got a couple of, can we have a couple more minutes, Ed? Are we allowed? There's a couple more questions.
Can I just say, because in the next session, a lot's going to be said about the Creative Careers programme, which links in with everything that you're talking about here, and so I won't go into it too much, but the idea of using the CEC network, the changes that are happening overall to the careers system, I'm working really quite deeply in that as Creative and Cultural Skills with the Creative Industries Federation and with Screen Skills, and so everything, this kind of idea of opening things up, ambassadors, giving an hour, putting out training to the people that are in the CEC network so that they can empower the schools. It is happening, and asking people to give. So I'm not saying too much, but it will come in the next thing.
Philippa, just before, sorry, I was going to say, an action we could take from this is maybe put together all of the links to all these groups.
Yep.
So, you know, I do ambassadors, I do enterprise advisor, but some of the groups here being talked about I wasn't aware of. So if we all have everything on one page, we can all get involved with each other.
Yeah, that was my question. Who would be the conduit? Yeah.
I think that would be the Skills Hub, and possibly working with Ed in terms of linking with the group. But the Skills Hub would, because they are setting that up through the Skills Pledge, and the Skills Hub, as Stuart said, we work together in that Skills Hub and the Careers Enterprise Company work within our team in the Skills Hub. So I think it's there. That's the focus.
And I suppose we've got the information from today, haven't we, in terms of everyone's here, so we could have a starting point in terms of a one-pager and even just circulating that, and then you know, are you best placed to speak to the Skills Hub, or is that Ed, or
no, me?
Yeah. So I suppose, are you all right to pick that up?
To give you some confidence, there's an event that's set up in Blackpool, but the managing director and BAE is the chair of it. It's called Responsible Business Network. We had their 3rd meeting at Russell School a couple of weeks ago, and all of the major movers and shakers in the Blackpool area partnering with schools and really targeting that NEAT.
Needs.
And partnering people. So as an SME, I've just committed to pay for a breakfast for children on the summer schools, because a lot of the children arrive at the place and don't have breakfast. So, you know, I'm just a small SME.
I know that
to pay for breakfast.
CEC in Blackpool are looking for what are called cornerstone employers.
Yes, that's part of this.
And they're directly looking for people from the arts and culture and the creative industries. So Yeah.
So unless anyone else has got anything to say, I think we've got 2 more. Fight. Okay.
I was actually, I think it linked to what you just said, that I wondered if there was something to be learned from cultural institutions. So we're sat in a museum at the moment. I do a lot of work, so I've been a STEM ambassador. I'm on a STEM Ambassador project in Manchester, but I'm also an artist who goes and works in schools and works with museums and galleries. Currently working with the V&A on a brilliant programme called Digital Lab Nation, where we go into schools for 4 sessions and they spend some time in galleries and sometimes with the teachers. And I think going in for an hour and just giving an hour of your time isn't enough. I think you need to share whole projects and more processes. And I think cultural organisations are a great place to do that. And I think maybe there needs to be more crossover in those organisations that not have the digital strategy and the cultural strategy. Let's bring them together.
Agreed. I'm going to kind of echo that thought in the sense that, so I've come from Darwen Museums today, so I'm nothing to do with this area, but we're trying to create a museum of making. And so as well as developing aspiration, which I definitely think we need to do and share people's skills and journeys of how they got into careers, I do also think it's about developing passion in those young people, to become invested in developing their interests, to then know what they want to do. So as well as aspiration and telling them about all the careers and the skills that they have to develop, it's about finding their interests and their passion and helping them realise that. And I think also something that we're trying to do is create co-produce things with people. So I think a lot of the time we're kind of developing and designing programs without these young people in mind. So actually maybe having some young people here and asking them what they'd like to know about stuff is also really valid and would be useful as kind of informing some of these discussions about actually what do they need. So it starts from a need rather than kind of what we think they need. And that's very much kind of an approach that we're working on. And also thinking about then cultural organisations being places where families can get engaged, and it's often families who also dictate or not necessarily dictate, but who shape these kind of stereotypes and you know what young people want to do. So we're doing a project in a school at the moment, and a lot of the kids are saying they actually want to be taxi drivers, YouTubers, all of these kind of different things. They want to be gamers because that's what they're influenced by on social media, and so we have to think broader as well about what their interests are, as well as kind of thinking about just skills and just jobs. It's about developing passion in the individual to know what you want to do. So yeah, I'm just adding that in at the end really.
Okay, last word. Yeah, I think that is a good last word, isn't it? So I think we've overrun, haven't we, Ed? So we're going to get told off. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's a good, so it's, I suppose everyone's been passionate today, hasn't they? And it's a really good point to say, actually, you know, it's about finding your passion, no matter whether that's science or arts, and making sure that young people get support along the way to do what they want to do. So yeah, thank you. Hopefully everyone found that a really interesting discussion. And it sounds like that we've got an action. Yep. So yeah, shall we circulate that list of everyone that's been here? Can you do that?
If anybody doesn't want their detail sharing, we do it that way, just tell us instead. We won't do that, but we'll circulate the outcomes. We are recording today for the reason that we want to share the outcomes more broadly, more widely. And it would have been great today to have some teachers here, more teachers, young people. That would have been. It's hard to do that on a Friday morning, and that's why we're having this conversation throughout the weekend as well. So tomorrow afternoon at Blackburn Cathedral, we've got a panel with Andrea Zakaraku, Global Teacher of the Year, championing arts and creativity in education. Alison Clark from Arts Council, Daniel Charlie, who's upstairs having a meeting with his partners now, and others as well, to actually look at how these issues actually translate to parents and to young people as well. So it is something that's going to be communicated and amplified throughout the weekend. So I think on that,
Just do a shout out for my session this afternoon.
Yeah, do your shout out, Sandra.
Okay. So this afternoon at 3 o'clock, I'm just running a breakout session with Blackburn College, and it's all about apprenticeships in the creative industries and how apprenticeships can be applied to the creative and the business functions of people's businesses. So if anyone's interested in coming along, and it's basically a Q&A session. There will be a bit of talk at the beginning, but it's mainly for people to ask the questions that no question's a stupid question kind of room. So.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you very much.
It's okay to do a little shout out. I'm a dancer and I'm making a piece about space, astrophysics. So just when we circulate details and things, basically I would need support and help, and I think there's a wealth of people in the room who would be able to do that. I just wanted to let you know that we all know it. We know it. There's inspiring people out there who are ready to do the things that we want to action in this room, and this is an incredible network to make that happen. Yeah, thank you so much for today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks for listening to this series of podcasts, especially produced by Creative Lancashire. We hope you've enjoyed listening to them and you've been inspired. For more information on the National Festival of Making, please visit our website at www.nationalfestivalofmaking.co.uk.